Sheri Morrow, a fun-loving and outgoing Army veteran, came to Crestview, Florida with plans to build a life with her husband, John, and their young daughter. Her plans ended tragically in the early morning hours of December 5, 1993. About 4 o'clock in the morning. The police were called after a woman who was lying across the tracks had been struck by a freight train. Sheri Morrow, 24, was eventually identified as the victim of the crime. According to the authorities, it wasn't immediately clear if she moved herself into that position or if foul play was involved. Sheri suffered fractures to her skull and ribs during the autopsy conducted by the medical examiner. The ME sent blood samples to a lab for a toxicology report to be prepared. Her husband was interviewed by police in order to find out what happened before Sheri's death was unusual. Officials learned that the couple hosted a party at their home that went late into the night. Detectives interviewed John and his wife to determine whether they had been going through a rough patch in their relationship during the evening and that they had gone out for a walk over the course of the walk. After the two talked, he went home and she went to stay with a friend, John told authorities. According to all accounts, Sheri did not drink alcohol. A toxicology report carried out 2 days after her death, however, confirmed that her blood alcohol level exceeded the legal limit by 3 times. Officials subsequently considered that Sheri's death might have been the result of an alcohol-induced accident, or perhaps she committed suicide. Investigative producers learned that when police dug deeper into the couple's relationship, they learned that John had at least 2 girlfriends, they told producers. Sheri was at the party the night before her death, and one of those women was at the party. At that point, the authorities discovered that Sheri had already begun divorce proceedings. Investigations have revealed that the picture that emerged of John Moore was one of a young, irresponsible father who wanted to live his life the way he wanted to live it, say investigators. Then, on December 10, investigators learned that the medical examiner had made an error. Sheri's blood alcohol level was actually 0.00. Investigators wondered if other mistakes could have been made. The theory that Sheri had died by suicide by the locomotive didn't quite add up for detectives. But with no new leads to follow, they closed the case and it was ruled a suicide. However, Lieutenant Wayne Grandstaff Sr., former patrol supervisor for the Crestview Police Department, believed it was too soon to discard the evidence. "The evidence custodian brought me back the evidence bag I had turned in," he said, adding that it contained clothing. "I stuck it in the trunk of my patrol car." In 1995, a surprise witness came forward with new information, according to accident, suicide, or murder. The witness, who was at the Morrow house party, told authorities that he spoke with John after he'd come back from walking with Sheri. The witness stated that John's hand was injured and his knuckles were very red, and when he asked his friend about it, he said, "Well, when we were arguing at the stop sign, stayed turning at Colusa County, and told producers. In light of the new statement, the case was reopened." Officials asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's crime lab in Pensacola to take a look at the first medical examiner's report. Based on blood evidence and the presence of rigor mortis shown in the paramedic report, Jan Johnson, retired Florida law enforcement crime lab analyst, concluded that Sheri was already dead when the train struck. Forensic findings and blood stain patterns from clothing evidence were observed in the trunk and staff's car. With new witness statements, the investigation. The engineer and conductor of the night train passing through Crestview on December 5, 1993 had seen 2 people, a tall man in a dark trench coat and red, walking along the tracks at midnight the night Sheri died, officials learned. When she was found, John's trench coat covered Sheri's body. A few months after reopening the case, a man who attended the party, Stephen Meek, told police that John told him he planned to take her to the railroad tracks and kill her, investigators told producers. In April 1997, Sheri's body was exhumed so that a second autopsy could be done. It revealed that Sheri's hyoid bone had been fractured, indicating that she'd been strangled. An injury to the back of her head that had not been documented in the original report was also found. "I believe the injury to the back of the scalp allowed her to go down but not die, which then required the strangulation," said Dr. Michael Birkland, Okaloosa County medical examiner. In a follow-up police interview, Meek said that John confided to him that he'd punched his wife, beat her head against the train tracks, and strangled her before covering her with his trench coat. In hopes of capturing a confession from John, Meek agreed to wear a wire and record a conversation with his friend over lunch. but Meek immediately told John that it was a trap. Investigators raced to bring John in for questioning. He denied murdering his wife and said he learned of her death from law enforcement. Despite his repeated denials, John was charged with Sheri's murder 4 years after her death. As prosecutors prepared to present the case to a grand jury, Meek once again flipped the script on them. He claimed that what he had told officials earlier about John confiding in him about killing his wife was a lie. At this point, police decided to arrest Meek as an accessory to murder after the fact, said Elmore. Ultimately, in a grand jury proceeding, Meek stated that John confessed that he'd killed his wife. At trial, defense attorney's main argument was that Meek, the prime witness, was a known liar. That was a hurdle for prosecutors who also had to address errors in the first autopsy. During deliberation, the jury couldn't come to a unanimous verdict for first-degree murder. The panel returned with a verdict of second-degree murder. In September 1999, the judge used his discretion, based on the circumstances of a case, to sentence outside the guidelines of 7 to 22 years. John Morrow was sentenced to life in prison.